Hello and welcome back to the Virtual Learning Channel. My name is Kassidy and I'm a board certified music therapist at Able Arts Work. Today's video is all about the orchestra. We are going to be learning about all the different instrument families that you can find in an orchestra. Plus, we are going to be testing our ears at the end of this video to see if we can guess the correct instrument based on the sounds that I play. So, are you ready to get your brain and your ears working today? Let's jump right in. The instruments in an orchestra can be categorized into 4 main families. 1. Strings, 2. Woodwinds, 3. Brass, and 4. Percussion. First, let's talk about the string family. You will find more string instruments than any other type of instrument in an orchestra. Most string instruments are played using a bow or plucking the strings. An example of a string instrument that is not in an orchestra usually is a guitar. And you play guitar by plucking the strings. The act of plucking or bowing a string instrument creates vibrations that produce the sound. Example instruments you can find in the string family are violin, viola, cello, double bass, and even harp. Let's listen to a couple of those now. First, let's listen to how a violin sounds. Up next is the cello, which is much bigger than a violin. And finally, here's an instrument that is way bigger than a violin and even bigger than a cello. It's the double bass. As we listen to these different instruments, pay attention to how they differ from one another, specifically how the instrument families differ from one another. The end goal of this video is to be able to differentiate between different instrument sounds. Next, let's talk about the woodwind family. Woodwind instruments produce their sound by blowing into a mouthpiece, like this. Some woodwind instruments, like a clarinet, use a reed to make the sound. In woodwind instruments, you will see a lot of holes where you put your fingers over to control the pitches of the instrument. Some other woodwind instruments include saxophone, flute, oboe, bassoon, and of course clarinet. Let's go ahead and listen to a couple of those instruments I just mentioned. Up first is the saxophone. Saxophones do require reeds. In contrast to saxophones, flutes do not have reeds, but instead a hole where the mouth is meant to go over to blow air into. And finally, let's go ahead and listen to how the clarinet sounds. Did you hear how the woodwind instruments differed from the string instruments? Now I want to talk about the brass family. Brass instruments are pretty fun because they're played by buzzing your lips together into a mouthpiece. I'm now going to poorly demonstrate how a trumpet player would blow into their mouthpiece. If you'd like, you can try that at home. All you need to do is put your lips together, but then you need to blow a lot of air through the closing between your lips, like this. Some instruments that you will find in the brass section of an orchestra include trumpet, saxophone, tuba, and French horn. Let's listen to some of those right now. This is what a trumpet sounds like. And here is a French horn. And finally, here's what a tuba sounds like. This instrument is pretty large. As you were listening, did you hear how the brass differ greatly from the woodwinds? Even though they're played similarly by blowing into a mouthpiece, the sounds they produce are very different. And finally, we have an instrument family that we should all be fairly familiar with. It's percussion! We play a lot of these instruments at program and at home. I even have a percussion instrument with me right now. Does this look familiar? It's an egg shaker. Percussion instruments produce their sound by being hit, scraped, or rubbed. Some percussion instruments are even pitched. For example, a xylophone has pitched notes, but you play it by striking it with a mallet. Fun fact about percussion instruments is that a piano is also considered a percussion instrument. This only includes upright grand pianos. Grand pianos produce their sound because there are strings inside of the piano, and when you hit one of the keys on the piano, that triggers a hammer to hit the strings to produce the sound. So why isn't a piano considered a string instrument then? Well, it's because those strings are hit rather than bowed or plucked. Let's listen to two examples of percussion instruments. One will be a drum, but the other will be a pitched instrument, so you can hear the differences between a melodic percussion instrument and a regular percussion instrument. Up first is a snare drum. Now here is a pitched percussion instrument. This is what orchestral bells sound like. Now that we have listened to examples of instruments in every single family in the orchestra, it is time for our quiz. It's time to test our listening skills. Are you ready to try it out? Let's do it. And now, it is time to play Guess That Instrument! What instrument is this? Did you guess the instrument correctly? Let's reveal the answer. It is a violin! Now, what instrument is this? Did you guess the instrument correctly? It is now time to reveal the answer. It's a trumpet! And now for the next instrument. So, did you figure it out? It's time to reveal the answer. It was a clarinet! And now, here is the final instrument. So, do you know what it is? Let's reveal the answer. It's a snare drum! And that concludes our lesson on instrument families that you can find in an orchestra. I hope you learned a lot from this video. If you need to revisit any of this information or practice the quiz again, you can always revisit this video in the future. Bye-bye!